Sea levels are no longer rising slowly, they're surging. Like a beast that's finally awakened, water begins consuming the land, swallowing entire cities whole. Streets turn to canals, suburbs vanish beneath crashing waves. In mere hours, coastal metropolises are flooded. And this isn't just flooding, this is the beginning of Earth's transformation into a global water world. A planet where land is legend and survival depends not on innovation but desperation. Could we survive if Earth became fully submerged? Could humanity cling to existence in a world where there is no dry ground, no soil, no forests, and no familiar horizon? Or is this the final chapter in our species' story? While it might sound far-fetched, the foundation for this scenario is disturbingly real. Earth is already mostly water, 70% of its surface covered by oceans. But the remaining 30%, the land we live on, farm on, build on, and take for granted, is the fragile barrier between us and oblivion. If that land disappeared beneath the sea, everything about civilization would be upended. The chain of events that would spark this collapse begins with a climatic catastrophe. Imagine a heat wave so intense, so sustained, that it ignites wildfires across entire continents. Winds whip those fires into firestorms, fueling chaos and blanketing the atmosphere with ash. But what's worse than fire is what follows. An unstoppable surge of heat that triggers the complete meltdown of Earth's ice reserves. That ice, currently locked in glaciers, ice caps, and Antarctica's massive sheet, makes up 10% of all land. In the last ice age, 12,000 years ago, nearly a third of Earth's land was ice. So today's percentage might seem small, but its impact isn't. If all of it melted, sea levels would rise by a staggering 70 meters, about 230 feet. That alone would be enough to erase every coastal city on Earth. Gone would be New York, Miami, Vancouver, Rio de Janeiro. London would vanish, Paris would drown, Venice would be erased. Entire nations like the Maldives, Fiji, and the Bahamas would be obliterated in less than a day. Japan's most populated regions would disappear. The Netherlands, home to over 17 million people, would cease to exist. And across the globe, chaos would reign. As waters surged inland, governments would scramble to coordinate evacuations. Highways would clog with desperate drivers trying to escape the rising tide. Helicopters would buzz overhead, but the water would move faster than anyone could organize. The attempt to save lives would devolve into mass panic. Aid trucks wouldn't arrive. Emergency shelters would overflow. The richest nations might attempt to build artificial islands, offshore platforms, or floating cities, but it would be too late. The engineering required takes decades, and the sea would rise in days. Underwater construction would fail, platforms would collapse. Billionaires and politicians who fled to high ground would find their safety temporary. This isn't an event that pauses for human planning. It's total transformation. 1/3 of humanity would be gone within weeks, billions displaced, millions dead. The survivors would fight not just the water, but each other. Stores would be looted, gas stations would be overrun, food and clean water would become the new gold. The power grid would collapse under stress, and without communication, people would be cut off from their families, not knowing who lived or died. The night would become terrifying, cold, dark, and silent, except for the rising sound of waves and wind. In all this confusion, the worst was still to come. Beneath the surface of the world's oceans lie over 1 million underwater volcanoes, silent giants that stir when disturbed. The massive temperature spike that melted the ice would also awaken these long-dormant threats. One by one, they would erupt, some violently, some steadily. But together, their eruption would send shock waves through the crust of the earth, tectonic plates would buckle, magnitude 8 earthquakes would shake every corner of the globe. Cities not already underwater would crumble from beneath, the sea would froth with energy. From coast to former coast, tsunamis would rise. Massive walls of water smashing into lands already flooded, collapsing buildings and pulling entire populations into the abyss. And as the volcanoes continued erupting, they would release something even more dangerous than lava: water. You see, Earth's mantle is not dry. Deep beneath the crust, it holds water, possibly twice the volume of all the oceans on the surface. And when volcanoes rupture those hidden reservoirs, even more water floods into the already bloated oceans. The sea level surges higher. All that's left of dry earth, mountaintops, ridges, highlands, now slip beneath the waves. Human civilization as we know it ceases to exist. The cities, nations, and cultural landmarks that defined us, gone. In this desperate world, martial law is declared by what remains of organized governments. The few surviving militaries establish floating safe zones. Mountains become final strongholds. Helicopters drop supplies to anyone still above water, but it's chaos. No law can govern a planet being erased. With nowhere else to turn, surviving leaders attempt a new solution: life beneath the sea. Massive underwater domes, once only seen in science fiction, are proposed and prototyped. They'd house small communities, filter salt water, and farm in enclosed ecosystems, but these wouldn't be ready in time. Construction at scale would take decades. Meanwhile, survivors cling to anything that floats: barges, boats, oil rigs, cruise ships. These become nations unto themselves. Humanity's remnants drift across the surface of a planet that no longer has land. Without access to farmland, most traditional crops are gone. Those lucky enough to find seeds in soil try to grow food in buckets or artificial beds. Others turn to seaweed and algae, quick-growing and nutrient-rich but difficult to harvest without diving gear. Those who adapt survive, most do not. On many vessels, cooperation gives way to violence. Scarcity drives desperation, fuel runs out, electricity fails, boats drift aimlessly. Storms brew over an uninterrupted sea with nothing to weaken them. Hurricanes become supercharged, tearing through flotillas and wiping out hundreds of survivors at a time. There is no safe harbor. There is no escape. Diseases spread rapidly in these floating communities. Quarantine becomes impossible. Supplies dwindle. Tensions rise. Some resort to piracy. Others form fragile alliances. A few, the lucky few, manage to build order out of chaos, developing trade routes between floating settlements, salvaging technology, and even constructing desalination rigs to produce fresh water. These scattered survivors try to preserve some semblance of civilization, but they are outliers in a world gone wild. And yet, evolution never stops. Humanity begins to change. In some coastal regions of Earth today, the Bajau people live a semi-aquatic lifestyle. For generations, they have lived on houseboats and spent hours each day diving for food. Studies have shown that their spleens, organs that store oxygenated blood, are 50% larger than those of land-dwelling humans. That adaptation allows them to dive deeper and longer without equipment. In Thailand, the Moken people have developed underwater vision far better than most humans. They can focus and see clearly in murky waters, a trait developed through generations of necessity. If our species were to continue living on an ocean world, these traits would become more common. Children born in this flooded earth might one day swim better than they walk, but evolution takes time. Too much time. In a world where food is scarce, medicine is gone, and childbirth is perilous, we wouldn't last long enough to evolve into sea creatures. Infant mortality would skyrocket. Diseases would run rampant, genetic diversity would shrink, extinction would be inevitable. It wouldn't be the first time Earth erased life. In fact, it has done so 5 times already. The Ordovician extinction 445 million years ago wiped out 85% of species due to rapid climate shifts. The Permian extinction, known as the Great Dying, killed 90% of all life, and the most famous extinction 66 million years ago ended the age of dinosaurs in a matter of months after a massive asteroid impact. If Earth were to become a water world, this would be extinction number 6. 2 years after the flooding began, only a sliver of humanity would remain. A planet once home to 8 billion people would now host a few million scattered across drifting fleets and fragile underwater bunkers. With 70 to 90% of species gone, Earth would become a biological graveyard, and still, life might go on. Small communities farming algae and catching fish could form the seeds of a new age. Languages would evolve. Cultures would form based on the ocean. But it would be hard, and it would take centuries before anything like civilization returned, if it returned at all, because even now the planet would continue to change. Ocean chemistry would shift, carbon dioxide levels would rise, acidification would kill coral reefs and collapse marine ecosystems. Even whales, the kings of the sea, would find no food and die off. The earth would become quiet, beautiful, blue, and lifeless. And yet, somewhere on a raft, a mother might be teaching her child how to read. Somewhere in a submerged dome, a scientist might be recording the last data entries of humankind. Somewhere in a boat made of scrap metal, a teenager might look at the stars and wonder if someone out there could save us. We once came from the sea, and perhaps, in the end, we return to it.
But survival isn't about water, it's about adaptation. And while it's unlikely that all Earth's ice will melt overnight, climate change is already reshaping our coastlines. The oceans are rising, the ice is disappearing, slowly, yes, but surely. If we don't act now, this fictional nightmare could become a very real legacy. And maybe, just maybe, we should start planning for something bigger. A future where Earth is no longer our only home. A planet-wide evacuation, a settlement on another world. Because in the vast cosmos, water worlds may not be rare, but life is precious. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the deep both thrilling and thought-provoking, be sure to subscribe to Deep Space Digest, where every question leads to a world of possibilities.